So now to introduce our amazing panel. Adrianna Bozur is a project coordinator for the Pre-Apprenticeship program at the YWCA Hamilton. Adrianna graduated from McMaster University in 2011 with an honors BA degree in sociology. She has a passion for empowering women and girls in our community and has worked in several programs that support women in breaking down barriers and shattering glass ceilings. In 2019, she worked on the YWCA Hamilton's Equitable Pathways to Technical Fields and Skilled Trades project, which encouraged young women in high schools throughout Hamilton to explore career pathways in skilled trades and technology. In addition, she was the program coordinator for YWCA Hamilton's Pre-Apprenticeship program for women. She has worked to connect women entering the trades with mentors and to encourage employers to recognize the benefits and skills women can bring to the trades. Welcome, Adrianna.
Thank
Joëlle,
you so much, Linda.
Yeah, thank you. Next, we have Joëlle Kabisoso, and she is the founder and executive director of the Sisters in Sync. Joëlle is an award-winning community engagement coordinator, workshop facilitator, and social entrepreneur. Joëlle holds a BA in human ecology and a specialization in family studies from Brescia University College and has a family mediation certification from York University. She is the founder and executive director of Sisters in Sync, a nonprofit with a mission to bridge the gap between the lived experience of Black trauma survivors. She is an advocate for equitable access to resources for marginalized individuals and is a firm believer that sharing one's journey is key to promoting social change and fostering a sense of community. Welcome, Joëlle.
Thank you.
And Tracy Medve. And there are the dogs. So I'm just going to keep talking, Tracy. I'll just keep my voice raising as the dogs bark a little louder. All right, and there's no one home to stop them. So Tracy is the president and CEO of KF Aerospace. Since 1985, Tracy has held various senior airline management positions at Norcan Air, Time Air, Canadian Partner, and Canadian Regional Airlines. Tracy was the co-founder of CT Aero Projects, a Calgary-based consultancy focused on air transport resource management, working with a wide range of public and private aviation clients around the world. And from 2007 to 2012, Tracy was the president of Canadian North Airlines. In May of 2013, Tracy was appointed as the president of KF Aerospace and became president and CEO in August 2021. Tracy is a lawyer by training, University of Saskatchewan, 1982, and in 2009 graduated from the John Molson School of Business Global Aviation MBA program at Concordia University. She is also the 2007 recipient of the John Molson School of Business MBA scholarship and was inducted as a member of the Beta Gamma Sigma Honor Society in 2009. Tracy is the past chair of the Air Transportation Association of Canada and the first woman in Canada to be inducted as an honorary life member of the ATAC, which is the Air Transportation Association of Canada. She also sat as director of the Canadian Association of Defence and Security Industries, CADSI, and was a member of the University of British Columbia Okanagan External Advisory Board. Since 2003, she has served as a part-time member of the Transportation Appeal Tribunal of Canada. And Tracy is the current chair of the Fortis BC Board of Directors. Tracy also served in the Canadian Armed Forces Reserves as a signals officer from 1975 to 1981. She has 2 sons and enjoys golfing, cycling, and she is learning to play the piano in her spare time. Although I'm not sure what spare time you have, Tracy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thanks to all of our panelists. Like, you know what, like just listen to what I just said about each and every one of you. It is really amazing, the dedication, the background, the knowledge that each of you have. And what we'll learn too is just your perspectives through the next little bit of this presentation as we start into the question and discussion period. So we'll just roll out the conversation from here, and each of you can bring your voice to what I asked. And so the first question that I wanted to start with was, what has your experiences been advocating for yourself or others in your career and even in your personal life? And this is always where I wait, who's going to speak first.
I can begin, Linda.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so firstly, I just wanted to say thank you for that wonderful introduction, and I'm really excited to be a part of this panel this afternoon. To answer your first question, I'm currently working as an employment counselor for YWCA Hamilton's STEP program. And this program provides employability skills and life skills that help young women and non-binary youth overcome barriers and also find meaningful employment. So this really ties into my own personal experiences as well, because being a young woman myself, I can really identify with some of the youth that I support and the challenges that they face. Being young in itself is one barrier, because, we often find that a lack of job experience can really work against young people. However, when you add on some of the other barriers that many of these young people that I work with are experiencing, it makes it increasingly difficult for them to find work. Being a visible minority, having a disability, a lack of family support, mental health issues, newcomers, being trauma survivors, all these barriers really create so many obstacles for some of the people that I work with. And so I'm so happy to be able to advocate on behalf of these individuals. I find that it's very meaningful and rewarding to me.
Anyone else want to add to that? So the discussion about, your experiences advocating for yourself or others throughout your career.
Yeah, I can go ahead.
Thanks, Joëlle.
Just like Adrianna, thank you all so much for having me. I'm a little nervous, but I think I'll be fine. So personally, my experience in advocating for myself, firstly, I find that it's always something very challenging. I think that growing up, I've seen a lot of women and just different individuals speaking up for people and really working towards creating communities and areas that are safe. But I think that as you kind of get in there, it's not as easy as you think it is, especially when it comes from yourself. I think that especially as women, we tend to not often speak up for ourselves. We don't feel like we can take up space and really just be sort of at the center of the attention. But I think that as we kind of see how society is moving and we see the women and girls that are standing in positions of power and position where they can truly create lasting impact, I think that it's something to know and something, especially for the younger generation, to kind of use as encouragement. So the last couple of years, I've been working for legal aid, so supporting low-income community members getting access to legal services. And that for me in my career has been a form of advocacy that I didn't expect myself to get into, but as I'm getting into it, I'm seeing that there are so many barriers and very few people that actually speak up or encourage people in marginalized situations to get the confidence that they need to speak up. So a lot of what my goals are is to just help people build up that confidence so that they can, stand up in front of a room and speak on their behalf, but also creating that space for others to speak on their own behalf. I think it's the true key to inclusive advocacy.
Thank you, Joëlle. Tracy, do you have anything to add to this one?
Yes, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And I expect that I might learn a lot from you about advocacy, more than you might learn from me. I'm older and started my career probably before a lot of you were born. And if you go back those 30, 40 years when I was starting and going through university and through law school, the world was quite different than it is now. We were about 20% women in the law school class. So that was, we were already a large minority in that world. And the concept of advocacy didn't exist. It just didn't exist. You had to basically, if you wanted to move forward, you just put one foot in front of the other and just tried to move forward. And there were definitely barriers. I think I think that, you know, they're real, they do exist. And if you can find help from others to move forward, but I think you also need to get out of your own way and just say, I know how to do this stuff. You know, this is what I do know how to do. This is what I don't know how to do. And I'm prepared to dive in head first and give it a shot. And don't be scared to choose what you want to do and move forward in that direction. That's all I can really offer in the way of advocacy from my own experiences. You had to just be your own advocate in a way when there was not that really that concept out there in the world. So it was a lot of running into walls and then stepping back and dusting yourself off and going forward. But at the end of the day, I think the most important part of that is if you do it yourself, you will have those skills to, if you do it once successfully, you'll have those skills to do it again for yourself and again for yourself and again for yourself. And I think that all adds up at the end of the day.
Thanks, Tracy. And a really great perspective when you talk about we get in our own way, right? We put up some of those barriers ourselves. Does anyone else, have some comments on that and how we can kind of change the way we think in that way? Because I do agree 100%. I hear that over and over again with a lot of women that I know. It's that they'll say to me, I get in my own way.
Yeah, I think that it's very easy for us to get in our own way when we've kind of never seen a way or a path created for us. I think for probably a lot of us here, we've had to literally like carve out either our careers or, just sort of the direction in which our lives head. And so I think that when you kind of are met with that challenge, it feels almost as though nothing is possible, right? Because a lot of people may know the skills that they have and they may be confident in the skills that they have, but it's just also a lack of resources that kind of contribute to those barriers. So then rather than facilitating sort of the path for somebody, we're making it harder for themselves because already one, you can't see sort of like the end, the light at the end of the tunnel. And then two, no one's actually, giving you a flashlight or a shovel or things that you actually need to be able to go for it. So I think it kind of plays in part where we can be the ones that stand in our own way, but it's not because we just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to stand in my own way, So, yeah.
Did you want to add anything to that, Adrianna?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely have to agree with that. I find that a lot of the women that I work with, especially when you first meet them, they often say things like, I don't think I'm really good at that. And I don't really have a lot of skills in this area. And I'll just let you know right now, I'm not, I have a lot of anxieties about this because I don't think I'm so good at that. And then, you document all those things, but as you start working with them, it's like, no, you actually are really great at that. And you do have those skills. It's just that ability for them to recognize it and to develop that confidence. And then those skills kind of, they shine through. So I think that definitely speaks to that whole getting in your own way. And sometimes it just takes somebody else to tell you, you can do it. And so I think that's really important to have people to advocate on behalf of those people and kind of empower them to be able to advocate for themselves moving forward.
And what about, what you've needed to do, like how you've had to change how you advocate for yourself compared to what you've witnessed with your male counterparts?
For me, I had to stop being polite. I had to stop kind of being like, oh, can you please? And just taking more of a authoritative style, like being very straightforward with what I want. I think when you allow people the space to kind of interpret what it is that you're asking or to, decide what's best for you, it really, it's discouraging and it doesn't produce any real tangible skills or experience. So for me, it's been a lot of letting go of politeness. I mean, I'm not coming in from a rude place and just being mean, but hey, if I have to, I have to. But it's really just knowing that in the male world, they don't play fair and they don't play nice all the time. And so we might as well just meet them where they're at, essentially.
Any more perspective on that one?
Yeah, I really agree with what Joëlle said. I think that it's a big part of it is really being assertive and having that confidence, developing that confidence. And in my work with women, helping women get into the skilled trades, we know that those jobs are dominated by men. And so, you really have to advocate for them and encourage them to have that sense of confidence and assertiveness. And I feel like it is definitely difficult at first, but my experience is that I've always had really positive outcomes with women being able to say, yeah, you know what, you're right. I am going to go in there. I am going to be more assertive and speak my mind and say what I want. So it's really important.
I think, the assertiveness thing is interesting, and I don't disagree with it, but some people just aren't that way so much, and it's a foreign space for them to occupy. So another way that I found is to find a way to let people get your way. And you can do that in other ways. I think there are times when you just have to be really straightforward, but there's also other times when, if you go about it in the right fashion, you can eventually get people to go, oh yeah, actually, maybe that's not such a bad idea. And you almost trick them into it in a way. You lay out your arguments why and so on, and you can be nice about it, and then pretty soon you find out that you have advocates on your for what position you want to take or what direction you want to go. And so that can work well also for those that are not comfortable actually being assertive. And I also recommend speaking with a deeper voice if people are not listening to you, and I'm not even kidding about that. Just talk deeper, because suddenly it's like you could say the same. A woman could say 5 words, and guys in the room sometimes don't listen to that. If you say it in a deeper voice, or if one of the guys says exactly that, it's like, oh, that's a great idea. No. I just said that. You guys weren't listening. So I don't want to sound goofy about that, but it's sometimes you just have to sort of do that. And it's worked. Try it sometimes. Just try it sometimes and see if I'm wrong.
I like that. It's interesting, when you bring something like that forward and people are like, what? Like, do that. But you have to learn, I think, to adapt and figure out ways to move forward and what works, because it works differently with different people too, and whether you are assertive or whether you just sort of work it and eventually bring them on board, as you just mentioned there, Tracy, with your idea. We talked a little bit about some of the barriers, but do you have specific barriers that constantly come up that you've been faced while you've been on your journey advocating for yourself? And Tracy, I don't know if we can start with you, in the sense that I know you talked about not necessarily advocating for yourself, but you would just hit that wall and you'd bounce back and then you'd go at it again. What are some of the biggest barriers been for you during your career?
When I graduated from law school and started in the aviation business, I was back in 1985. I was young. I was in my 20s, and I think the fact that I was that young of a woman, trying to, and I started my first job as an in-house counsel for Norcan Air, and I think the fact that I had a law degree gave me a little bit of a leg up. Like, people go, oh, okay, well, she's got a law degree, I guess, might listen to her for a minute. But and honestly, I really didn't know anything at that point. Just didn't know anything, but I got a little bit of credibility from having that education. So I think that's important, but I think you need that anyway. I don't care what gender, who you are. Having a good education is always helpful. So yeah, it was really not about a lot of people not thinking that you have any credibility because you're young, and what would you possibly know about anything. And that was a sort of a common theme that came up time and time again. And you just have to kind of dust yourself off from that and recognize that some people might not think that you have credibility in what you're saying, but you have to keep saying it, and you have to just keep, as I say, if you run into a wall, you find a way around it, or it's maybe a bit more challenging than if you're not a female, but that was really the only real consistent theme, is just a lack of credibility, or the impression that I lacked credibility.
Yeah, and I think I hear that a lot, right? That it can often come down to that. It's just not being seen as credible, which is hard. That is a big barrier for a lot of people to get through. Joëlle, Adrianna, do you have anything to add to this one, just in the sense of some of the other barriers, just so that people are a bit more aware and understanding of the things that they may face out there?
Sure, I can certainly speak to some of the barriers that I encounter in terms of my professional career and the people that I advocate on behalf of. And one of the things that I still find is like those stereotypes and those misconceptions, especially for women trying to get into the trades. I think that we have certainly come a long way with employers and people in general finally starting to welcome women into more male-dominated occupations, but there's still so much work to be done in that regard. Those stereotypes are still present, and as outdated as they are, a lot of people still think that way, and so that's certainly been a challenge. It's challenging when you're doing this kind of work sometimes to accept as well that you can't change everybody's mind and you can't get people to see things from your perspective. But I think you just have to keep at it and be persistent. And in my own eyes, I feel like even if I can change one mind and help one person achieve their goal, and change a couple people's perceptions and kind of bust some of those myths and those stereotypes, then it makes the obstacles kind of worthwhile.
Thank you. Joëlle?
Yes, and to what Tracy said, I think for me, credibility plays a huge part in it, as well as the longevity of the support that you receive from a community. So what I find tends to be barriers, for me at least, being a Black woman with a grassroots organization, is really one, having that credibility, having people believe that we are a real organization and that we're actually doing impactful work. I think when you don't have the track record, or you don't have the capital that some more established charities or organization has, it tends to kind of play into your psyche a little bit, making you feel like what you're doing isn't actually needed work and isn't anything that anybody fully supports. And then the longevity of support also goes where I find that a huge barrier is when there's sort of like waves of movements happening, as we saw last summer with George Floyd's situation. It feels like things kind of happen at once, and there's like a height, and then after that, it kind of dies down. And I think that's a barrier that a lot of grassroots organization, Black-led or not, do face, is the fact that sometimes it does feel as though it's just sort of like a movement of right now to show face and to say that we're listening and we're learning whatever they say. And then it kind of goes back to, well, now you have to fend for yourself. So I think once we can really put together, how can we make some partnerships and relationships long lasting, as well as build on the credibility of smaller organization, it allows us to, one, advocate for ourselves, right? And also do so on behalf of others who may not have the courage. Like, I don't mind being rejected multiple times, but there's some people who just can't handle that. So when we kind of show people that, listen, we had to fight to build credibility, we had to, really work hard to get these partnerships, and you can too, but not just saying it, but actually providing them with the resources. Because of course, we all know resources are very limited and people tend to hoard them. So I think that when we kind of move away from that mentality and really look at things at the long-term perspective rather than just showing face, it helps on both ends.
So how do you know that you've reached your goal through the advocacy that you've been doing? Did you have benchmarks? Is there ways to really go, okay, like I've hit what I wanted to, I've done what I wanted to do here? Any perspective on that?
Yes, for me, a lot of it tends to be surrounding the people that we reach through our workshops. So we do a lot of self-esteem and self-efficacy building workshops where it just encourages people to really just look at their own skills and see how they can utilize that to access resources and also utilizing their voices. I started the organization as a response of my own story as a sexual assault survivor and having to just explain my situation to the police and getting them to believe me. I doubt till this day they actually did. And so a lot of the times we find that even when people are attempting to speak up for themselves, there's still kind of that lack of support and I don't know if it's the word believability. Um, and so I find that for us, we tend to measure it by how many people actually join the workshops, but also who can identify with the stories and experiences of others. So it's all about really bridging that gap. A lot of the times you may not seek support because you don't know that other people are going through certain things and you don't even know that certain services exist. And that was my situation. I couldn't believe in a million years that other people were experiencing what I was going through. So by creating a space like that, it allows people to, one, identify themselves through other people, and two, it encourages that sort of like collective confidence to speak up or to speak up for one another.
Adrianna?
Yeah, for me, kind of similar to what Joëlle is saying, reflecting on some of the amazing people that I've had the opportunity to work with. And that's whether it be the women that have successfully entered into the trades or even working with barrier youth, which is what I'm currently doing right now. I think seeing people start out being uncertain, not really realizing all the resources that are out there for them, being hesitant, really lacking that confidence and not recognizing the strengths that they have, and just not being sure how to even begin overcoming some of the obstacles that they face. And then slowly beginning to see like a transformation happen in them where, you're working with them and they start to kind of come out of their shell and be a little bit more confident. And you can really see that self-determination developing. That's when I feel that my advocacy is really making an impact on them. And then, of course, hearing that they have found meaningful employment in spite of some of the challenges that they've faced, that's always, I think, a really good measure as well. But in addition, I really think that, you could say that your advocacy has reached its goal when you've kind of empowered the people that you work with to know how to advocate for themselves. Because it's a great start for them to come to a program where they have, a counselor or somebody who's working with them, but then to really provide them with the tools so that they can feel confident enough to leave the program and then use their own voice moving forward when they're done with the program. I think that's also a really great measure of advocacy.
Thank you for that. Tracy, anything to add to this one?
I don't really think I do have anything to add. I mean, both Adrianna and Joëlle have covered it off. I don't know that identifying those milestones that you want to reach and referencing that back to advocacy is any different than just saying, hey, this is what I wanted to do and I've arrived here, and all the barriers, whatever they are, have been moved, and I got to where I wanted to go. And those personal milestones are those are the success factors, and it's not just one thing that'll get you there.
How do you, Tracy, encourage advocacy in your organization now?
You asked me this question beforehand, before the thing, and I had to answer you, but I don't. The philosophy that I have for our company is not to have to teach people how to advocate for themselves, but rather to create a work environment where that isn't even a requirement. So we've been working really hard to try and make KF a place where anybody would be happy to come and work. We need workers. So obviously we need workers in the aerospace sector. And we're competing for those workers with many other industries. So it obviously makes sense for us to have the largest pool size of individuals as possible. So how do you go about doing that? We just did a KF diversity and equity and inclusion survey, for example, by Talent Map. And, I encourage people to come back to us with recommendations about, how we can do better, where we need to do better. So we're doing that. I think, we're working with Mohawk College. We're working with the college here, Okanagan College in Kelowna, to try and attract a broad base of students. We work in the public school system to try and make sure that everybody that's looking for a career understands that aerospace is actually a career option, because I think a lot of people just don't even get that, whether they're boys or girls, or it doesn't matter where they came from. It's not necessarily top of mind as a career choice. We're building a daycare here at the airport so that it makes it easier for people with families to come and work here. We offer all kinds of employee-based support programs so that if there are issues, family issues, and whatever might be going on in someone's personal life, they have access to that to help them keep their life at work sane. And we're turning out some really great technicians, because that's the hardest side of the job, to get people in. And we just got a report from one of our young structures techs who said that she's at a AME conference in Toronto, and her team, her and some other women on the team came in first, and she was the top person in the structures competition of the whole thing. So that's just, it's so fun to hear those kinds of stories, and very heartwarming to me to see that we can get that door open and encourage that kind of level of competency. I think it's fantastic. So, and there's always more you can do. But so advocacy isn't really the focus. That's not the focus. It's how do you just make this a workplace where you don't have to advocate. We do that for you.
I love that. I mean, and that's something we should all be working towards, right? Is just having that solid work environment for everyone to be a part of. Joëlle, you touched a little bit upon this when you talked about the results from workshops and things that you do, but what resources are available for those that are looking to advocate for themselves or others to help support them through that?
So I think one of the main resources is your own experience. I think if somebody is able to kind of sit down and look at where they've been and where they are and where they intend on going, that for me personally tends to be how I get the courage and the motivation to actually access the resources. When I know that things are available and I know where I've been and where I don't want to go back, I kind of have sort of a more autonomy to want to utilize spaces. I think another resources are the people around you. I think oftentimes people think that advocacy is only one thing, like you can only stand for one cause or support one thing. But I think that in really getting into your community and talking with your family and your friends, you'll really see that you can care about multiple things at once. And oftentimes it doesn't have to be on a huge scale. Like you don't have to be leading, marches with thousands of people. It can simply be helping a friend or speaking on behalf of somebody at school or even at work. And just like Tracy said, maybe creating workspaces that are mindful of people's different lived experiences and their needs. And then, of course, the internet. That's a really great place to find resources that can help you, one, get a little bit more educated on the different causes that you want, but also for those seeking the support and who want to advocate for themselves a little bit more, plugging into groups online that offer the same support that you're looking for. And also making sure that, again, you're filtering out anything that makes you feel less than. Because I think even when you know that there's a service, either people or even that inner voice can be very discouraging. So just knowing that at the end of the day, the impact starts with you and kind of transfers on to other people is like a really good stepping stone. But I would say that the best resource, honestly, is just getting into your community, listening to what people have to say. I saw something that said that people aren't really voiceless. They're just not really given the opportunity to use their voice. And so I think when we stop considering people as not having a voice rather than saying we just haven't created the platform for them to use the voice, it really changes the narrative and the understanding of what advocacy is. Because I think ultimately the goal is for people to speak on their own behalf. Like, I'd love to see some of the girls that attend the workshops and that use our support group speaking on their own, right? Not having to kind of lean on me anymore. And I think the goal is that it's not to kind of receive like accolades for yourself, but really to be able to see where somebody is now gone after seeing where they were at their lowest.
Thank you. And Adrianna, do you have anything more to add regarding the experiences that you've had with supporting advocacy?
Yes, for sure. So in my current role, as well as in some of my past roles, I've worked with a lot of barriered individuals who I often find they require advocacy at more of an intersectional level. So oftentimes I find that the women and the gender diverse individuals that I work with will often disclose that they're experiencing one barrier, but then as you get to know them and work closer with them, you kind of see that there's a lot more going on and that there are several interrelated issues that often come up that they need support with. And so that means you really need to look at things from a holistic perspective. And to really understand how to best support someone, I find that you really need to understand their narrative. And one of the key things I find to be really helpful with that is to build that rapport with the people that you're working with so that you can, really figure out how to best help them and overcome some of those obstacles that they're facing. And a lot of the obstacles, it's often like a domino effect. They'll tell you one thing and then you see how that one thing has affected something else in their life. And that's oftentimes how I find it goes when you're working with someone. So you really need to build that rapport and understand where they're coming from in their narrative. And, whether it be mental health issues or addictions or disabilities or, many of the other challenges that they face, you really need to look at it from that holistic perspective so that you can, find out what the starting point is to help them.
And what about advice that you can give to students or recent grads, as they launch and move forward in their careers or within their education? Do you have some advice that you can give to them?
For sure. I think when people hear the word advocacy, they often really think of, people who do advocacy work in a professional capacity. But in reality, I think there's so many ways to self-advocate, and it's so much more than that. I think it's a practice that everyone can really engage in, and there's so many different ways of doing it. And, I know Joëlle touched on some of those ones about using online resources and social media as well. Like, that's such a powerful tool. And I've heard of so many women connecting with, mentors and other people that have the same goals as them or who have actually gotten to overcome the same obstacles that they're experiencing. And so they can, connect that way. And so that's so important. And also just, I would say do your research, find out what resources are available out there and what programs are out there that can help you. I think a lot of people don't even know what's out there to help them. And oftentimes it takes that first step to connect with that one program that then connects you with another resource and another program. And it just gets better from there. So really look at what's available to you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add to that? Tracy, thanks.
I would say, the best advocate you're going to ever have is your own self. And I really do want to encourage people to have a lot of faith in that resource, because the community does provide so many more options now than 40 years ago. We didn't have the internet back then. Remember, none of you would have even grown up in a world they didn't have the internet. We didn't have the internet, right? God. So you had to figure it out on your own a lot of times. And, you know, I would say it's worked okay for me, not having access to a lot of those things. Maybe it was harder than it is today. I don't know, but I think there's lots of resources inside your own self. And so when I say get out of your own way, that's what I'm saying. Like, don't talk down to yourself. You know, you're better than you think. I would say be careful about the internet and about social media, because it, you know, for as fantastic as a resource as it can also be a very negative space, especially for young women. We've seen all kinds of, you know, horrible statistics about the impact of social media. So I would just stay away from that stuff as much as possible. And I would say, if, you know, challenge yourself to do something that you think is going to be really hard. Like, I joined the military when I was young and became an officer, you know, and got the opportunity to run a junior non-commissioned officers course one summer. And that was the hardest thing, honestly, I think I've ever done. I was in my 20s again, and it just put me into a space that was really strange, that I didn't really have a lot of experience with, and just caused me to have to do a whole bunch of things that I had no idea I knew how to do. And that lesson served me well my whole career. And I'm glad I did it. It was really, really challenging and scary a lot of days. So I would say sometimes if you early on in your career can challenge yourself to do something, you just go, I don't know, this is kind of interesting. I don't know anything about it, but I'm diving in both feet. You will learn stuff, and you will learn a lot of stuff about yourself and how strong you can be, and you'll be able to look after yourself really well.
Thank you. Joëlle.
And I echo that a lot, Tracy. I think the first step is taking that time to do some self-discovery, self-exploration, really just figuring out, you know, the things that matter the most to you. I think sometimes we also tend to overcomplicate things and we overthink things. And I think when we can just take that moment to pause, especially as a new graduate, like, I'm regretful I didn't get the time to pause. I kind of just like graduated and went to straight to work, and now I'm like, oh, I'm finally, you know, discovering myself, the things that matter the most. So I think if you can take that time to really explore different causes, right? Again, you're not forced to stay involved in one cause forever, and you're not also going to be looked down upon if you change causes. And I think that's probably one of the things that gets people a little nervous or scared to advocate for themselves or certain things, is feeling like you have to remain in a certain box. But I think with that self-exploration period, it really will open up doors and open up opportunities, and even give access to resources that one may have not known could even exist. So that's the biggest thing I would encourage really anybody, young, old, new, whatever. So I think that that's definitely like the first step.
Thank you. You know, I've had some conversations recently where you know, it's led to this discussion about women will get into technology, but especially into skilled trades. And then once they're there and they're on the job and they experience the work atmosphere, they end up leaving because the support isn't there, the environment isn't healthy for them, whatever that happens to be. Can you bring anything into the conversation about that, whether it's, you know, things that you've witnessed, you've heard? Because I think that that's something that really needs to be looked at is how do you change the environment so that when, you know, women enter into these jobs and into these fields, that it's a welcoming, comfortable environment. And Tracy, you did speak to this a little, you know, when you talked about the environment at KF, and I think that's really important. So what can we talk about here to look at how do we change that so that women who pursue these careers will stay in these careers?
Well, as I guess as you know, an employer for a large number of people, we have, you know, 1,000 employees across Canada. I think it's incumbent upon us as an employer, particularly if we want to have really well-skilled people, to try and create that environment so that when someone does come here, regardless of their background and all those things, it's a place that they find that where they're not running into those kinds of barriers, and that if they are, or if there's things that we as an employer haven't really thought of or haven't fleshed out well enough, that you also create an environment amongst your your managers and your supervisors and your leads to say, you have, it's incumbent upon you to create an environment where if someone comes to you with an issue, you deal with that in an appropriate way, and you make the possibility that someone might actually come to you with a suggestion or a complaint about something, that you present an open and willing face for them to be able to do that. I'd also say then from the other side, if you run into a barrier, coming to whoever you're going to speak to with the issue and a possible solution is always the best approach. And I also think that sometimes assuming that you're going to run into a problem creates a bit of a barrier on your own self. And so I would say, don't just assume that you're going to run into problems, because you might not. Go in as if you're not going to run into problems, and when you do, don't be scared to point them out, but be prepared to say, here's what I see as the issue, and here could be a really good problem, or I'm gonna volunteer to help try and sort this out. Any good employer won't give you a hard time for that, and I think as employers, we have an obligation to try and create that environment.
Thank you. Joëlle, Adrianna, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of twofold. One of it is inviting people to the table or to the room, but also allowing people to create their own tables. I think that oftentimes we leave it up too much to like our employers to kind of figure out what it is that they can do to make it a better work environment for us, and we don't usually vocalize what it is that we would like them to do. So I think if people can be invited more in sort of like decision-making processes, that will greatly impact the environment that's being created, but also allowing maybe subcommittees to be formed and allowing people to lead certain discussions so that way they could be at the forefront of what matters the most. I know I always come into the issue of, having male leaders that decide on like maternity leave stuff, and that, don't kind of have an understanding of the certain things that women go through, but yet somehow they are at the center of the policies or the programs that are available. So kind of shifting that, allowing for people with those lived experiences. And like Adrianna mentioned earlier, is just really applying that intersectional perspective so that we're able to really see the lived experiences and the different intersecting identities and aspects of someone's lives. But the first thing is always to have their voices at the center, have their voices included in those processes.
Yeah, and if I can include, I totally agree with that. A big part of it is on the part of the employer to really, kind of make sure that they're setting the bar high in terms of standards of what's expected, and having those policies in place that really foster an inclusive workplace, so that, you can try to eliminate or at least try to decrease the chances that some of those situations will arise. But I think, thinking or imagining being a woman in a workplace and being the only woman on that, on that job site or whatever the situation may be, I think it's really important at that point for women to kind of reach out and have that mentor in their life that can kind of share in the experiences and how, there are so many amazing women in the trades that are open to being that mentor for women that are just starting out. And I think that that's really important, is to kind of have that sense of, having that other person there that can share in those stories and say, what, I went through this and it wasn't fun, but I persevered, and you can too. And so I think that that's also really important.
I had the honor off the top to be able to introduce each of you with your incredible backgrounds. But I always like to hear from you as well, because that's me reading about you. But is there a story or anything else that you want to add about yourself that the people here can share in and learn from? Joëlle, can we start with you?
Yes. Oh wow, I have so many stories about myself. I think what would be great for people to know is that I am always looking for room and opportunities to grow. I am such a believer in, again, learning beyond what it is that I already know. There's so much joy in sharing your knowledge, but also acquiring knowledge from different people with different walks of life. And I think that what I like the most actually about the city of Hamilton is that we have this ability to bring people together. We have this ability to really foster spaces where people can feel seen and heard. And it goes beyond just using cliche words like, or inclusive and, all that kind of stuff, but it actually truly feels like that. And having been here for the last like 20 something years, for me, it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to do is contribute back to my community, being able to take what I've learned through boys and girls programs and my school and just the different services that the city offers and really trying to pass that along. I think that, again, people can learn at different stages of their lives. And so if I'm able to, with our workshops, impact someone that's at the prime of their life or that someone that's just coming into their womanhood, I think that I've done my job in terms of enriching the city and really just fostering kind of what we like to, say sisterhood amongst one another.
Love it. Thank you. It can also be words of wisdom, whatever you'd like to add to the conversation. Adrianna?
Yeah, so one thing that I'd really like to share is that oftentimes when I start working with different clients and kind of meeting them and seeing what their needs are or what they hope to find out of the program, one thing that comes up a lot that a lot of people say is, I just want to find a job that's meaningful to me. It doesn't have to be the best paying job. It doesn't have to check off all the boxes, but I just want to do something that I love. And it just comes up so often. It came up with the women in trades. It comes up with the youth. That's just like a common goal that a lot of people have, is just to find something that they can come home at the end of the day and say, I feel like I made a difference and I enjoy what I do. And so I think it's kind of ironic because that has, I found what I enjoy doing just by helping them find what they enjoy doing. And so that's been so meaningful to me and in this whole journey.
Thank you for sharing that. Tracy?
Probably one of the most interesting conversations I can remember having in my career was with a former boss of mine, a gentleman named Richard Barton, who was the president of Time Air. He passed away many years ago now, but we used to have this great debate about, he'd say, well, so what is your 5-year plan? Go, Richard, I don't have a 5-year plan. Why would I have a 5-year plan? Like, what do I need one of those for? I might miss something really good along the way as I'm sort of heading down the road to this goal, whatever it might be. There's a whole bunch of good offshoots. And if I had not done that, I might still be a lawyer. And that would be terrible because I don't think I'd have been a very good lawyer to begin with. And I would have missed being in this aviation aerospace career. And that would have been a sad thing. So we had that debate. So I encourage you not necessarily to get a 5-year plan, but if you're going down a path that you're not happy with, don't be scared to look around because there could be something else really interesting out there that your skills and your training might not look like they set you up for, but there's a huge ability for skills transference to do something else that is the love of your life and that's going to keep you engaged and happy. And but some of those things it takes a bit of it takes a bit of courage to do it. So I always think of this really nice song about a little boy that's, jumping off the garage and he's got a blanket for his cape. And when you're going to take a leap of faith, always trust your cape. And the point is that we're all do have those superpowers. You do. And sometimes when you're going to leap off the garage, you got to trust your cape and you'll get there, and most people will get out of your way and let you do it if you just, decide what you want to do and go forward.
Thank you. Wonderful. Well, we're going to open it up to questions. We'll see if anyone has any questions after we've had this discussion. And I'll give people, you can just put them into the chat, and we can go through them if there are any. Hopefully there's one or two. And we covered off an awful lot of great content throughout this discussion, but we'll see if someone's got something for us. I think this is the quiet, those quiet moments that Rebecca was talking about at the start, where we were, waiting to see if anyone's going to say anything or pose a question. We're quiet as we wait. And you can ask it too if you want. You can turn on your microphones and ask any questions that you'd like, or even a comment. Like if you've got a comment or perspective as well. Like I think that's how we all learn. Is sharing our ideas and sharing our life experiences. So we need like the Jeopardy music or something. Do, 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 do. Rebecca, you have your hand up. Thank you. What is your question?
Well, I figured that's the new natural way to bridge that awkwardness, right? Is put your hand up like in a class.
That's right.
I would just like to say thank you, everybody. This was excellent. It was insightful. Our panel was fantastic because there were some different opinions. Wasn't all the same. All three of you have approached your careers and the advice that you're giving from different perspectives. And I think that's also indicative of the whole environment of equity, diversity, and inclusion. We have many different stakeholders coming from many different places. And what I find is so fascinating is that the one common thread is that everybody wants to help people succeed. For some people, it's easier to get there. For some companies, it's easier to get there. Tracy, it sounds like you've done a fabulous job at KF creating that environment. The employer piece is so critical, and as part of our Women in Tech and Trades group, we see that all the time. The encouraging part is we are seeing employers approaching us, looking for ways to partner so that we can all work towards making this a much more equitable playing field, let's say. I recall, Adrianna, from early on with the YWCA Hamilton, you guys actually did a really good job in putting a package together for employers on how to make a difference in first of all, how to attract the talent and how to retain the talent. That is something that was extremely helpful. And if that still exists and if there's a link to it, please don't hesitate in sharing it because we can actually share it with everybody here. I guess so first of all, it's a thank you. Fantastic conversation and dialogue and the differing opinions. I guess the one piece again that Linda has already asked is that advice piece. And you guys have all given some really good advice for people. If there was anything else that you'd like to add that might be a little different, let's say to talk directly to our students that maybe are not quite in the workplace. If there is anything that they could do while they're currently in their studies that could help them start on this journey of either advocating, or Tracy, I loved what you said about creating the environment that you don't need to advocate. Any advice to actually to a student perspective, I think that's what I'd be asking for right now.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. And I see another question pretty much along the same line, that is, what can we do for students in college to make barriers easier to overcome?
For me, my thing is there's always going to be something. I remember when I was in school, I was always finding out something. I was short of credit, or, I wasn't taking the proper classes, and, now you may not get a career in this specific field. So there's always going to be something, but it's your job to put your best foot forward and just keep going. I think when we allow these some things to cloud our judgment and to really just take control of our emotions and we act upon emotions, we really limit ourselves. If there's one thing that our feelings are and emotions are, they're very deceptive. One day you feel something, the next day you don't. And so when we tend to kind of feel like we're not good enough, we move away from the truth. We move away from the fact that we are actually capable. And it's just a matter of one, knowing and acknowledging that, and two, just keep going. Like it sounds very cliche, but you just have to keep going and keep trying. And for some people, the resources kind of just fall onto their laps, and others, you might have to do a little bit more work. But the work is not for nothing. There's like things always turn around. So for someone who may be finding out that, you know, they're probably a credit short, there's a way to turn that around. And there's always resources and people willing. And we just have to start by just admitting we need help, because sometimes we don't tend to do that. We don't tend to admit that we can't do it on our own and that we do need people to support us. And so when we can first acknowledge that it's okay to ask for help, and it's also okay to fail, like at certain things, right? If we don't fail, we never really learn valuable life lessons. So just acknowledging that all of those things make up who you are and really create the journey for you, greatly affects the way that you view things, and also kind of contributes to lifting those barriers. But there's always going to be something.
Yeah, I would say.
Really, oh, sorry, go ahead,
Go
Tracy.
ahead. Oh, sorry. I was just going to agree with what Joëlle said. You are your own best caretaker. And it's your, you know, ultimately advocacy and all those things are lovely, but you still have the responsibility for looking after your own self and asking for help when you think you need it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the responsibility for your move forward still lands at your own feet. So you have to bear that in mind. It's not someone else's responsibility. But if you accept responsibility for that, for your movement forward in your life, no matter what you're doing, but sometimes you do need help or you need someone to give you some guidance, that's okay. But it still goes back to you at the end of the day. There's nobody else that's responsible for you. So that's all I have to say.
Great point. Yes. Adrianna?
Yeah, and I really agree with some of what was just said, because it's so true. There's always something. There's always barriers for everyone. You know, I really can't say that I know anyone in my personal life or through my professional career that has been able to say, you know, I went through school, everything went perfectly. I found a job immediately after, all the pieces fell into place. Realistically, that's really not anyone's story. And often, of course, some people experience more barriers than others, but there's always going to be something that comes up. There are always challenges. But I think the key thing to remember is really not to let those barriers or challenges define you. You know, there are ways to overcome them, and there are resources to help you. So really, I would say just aim high and keep going.
And I have one more question that's popped up here, and it says, do you think current equity projects are having a meaningful impact at turning the dial? Does anyone want to tackle that?
I'm not sure what the term equity projects really means, but I'm going to assume that the question is based on the fact that you've got, you know, our government has been telling us for a long time we need to be more equitable. And I'm talking about this from an employer's perspective now. You know, that we have to pay people equitably and we have to treat people equitably and all those things. Then you've got, you know, a focus that's come from social media. Really, social media can be a good thing, and it will shine a light on problems that then prompts people to have conversations they might not otherwise have had, and to take action against people that might not otherwise have been called to task for the way they've behaved. And I'm thinking of, you know, the whole Me Too movement, and you know, more recently, like what's going on in the Canadian military. You know, that there's some pretty, what seems to be some pretty shameful behavior there. And I think I think we do need to keep focus on those things, because that, if that's accurate information about that behavior, that's not right and it needs to get fixed. And I think if we don't talk about it, and if it's not in the public sphere, then it will just, it will never get resolved as a society. So I do think it's, you know, it's every little bit is helping to move us forward. Would be my perspective on it.
Thank you. Joëlle.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely a work in progress. I think that many places have yet to fully reach a space where equity and inclusion isn't kind of linked to tokenism in a sense. And so I think that there's definitely a lot more work to do. And I think with all the different movements that are happening, there's bound to be some long-term changes, things again that just move beyond a certain period in time in a certain wave. But you know, it's okay. Like I have my reservations with a lot of what goes into equity and inclusion, but I would say that for the most part, the effort is there. And again, like I said before, now it's just a matter of bringing the people that have those experiences on board for the long term.
And anything else? Oh, Adrianna, did you have a comment on that one as well?
Yeah, and I mean, I can speak a little bit on behalf of my organization's projects, you know, on a smaller scale, obviously, but, you know, just thinking what came to mind was our pre-apprenticeship project, because, you know, we know that some of these women that enter in these projects and they go into these programs and they get the schooling and then they get the job placement, and, you know, those barriers are still there. We do often have women say, you know, oh, I'm the only woman there, and they still have those doubts when they enter in. But, you know, when they come out of it, they also say that they may not have ever pursued that without that program. So even though, and on a small scale, it seems like a small program and you know, the bigger midst of things, but even if it helped a couple women get in it and achieve their goal and achieve their dream, and maybe they would not have done that otherwise. So a lot of those programs, even though they seem small, they are very impactful.
Love that. Do you have any closing comments that you'd like to make? Any last statements, or you know, bring in a perspective? You know, we've talked about employers' responsibilities, our individual responsibilities. You know, we've looked at and discussed just overall workplace and how to make that a, you know, a solid and strong environment for people coming in so that everyone wants to stay. But is there anything else that that you want to add before we wrap it up today?
I think you've asked some good questions, and I think we've covered off a broad array of suggestions. But just to sum it up, is don't be scared to, you know, to go forward and do what you want to do, and most of the rest of the world will get out of your way if you do that. So that's my closing comments, and thank you for the opportunity to participate today.
Yes, as well. Thank you so much. This was a really, really interesting and fun panel. I think my closing remarks would be essentially what I've learned is that communication goes both ways in a sense. For employers, it's important to ask the questions, and as well for employees to ask those questions as even as students, right? I think sometimes when we're not having those discussions because of sort of a chain of leadership and all the difficulties to reach the people on top, we miss out on some very important and valuable lessons. So the discussion has to go both ways. It's not just a matter of us telling them how they should do X, Y, Z, but it's also not a matter of them telling us you know, how they expect things to be done, but really having those engaging conversations that allows everybody to point out solutions and have their voices heard beyond just assumptions.
Yeah, I really like what you said, Joëlle, and that's kind of, what my thoughts were. I was going to say something very similar. So, yeah, I think that they both summed up what I was going to say. But I also wanted to say thank you so much for including me in this panel. And I've had such a great experience, and listening to Joëlle and Tracy's perspectives on things as well. It's been a really great experience for me.
Well, Joëlle and Adrianna and Tracy, thank you. Thank you very much for your perspectives today, for your insight, for your generosity of your time to be here and share those experiences with all of us. It's so much appreciated. And these conversations are what makes a difference and advances and moves things forward. So, I'm sure what you spoke about here will be very helpful. And the nice part is that we will post this online. So it will be seen again and people can view it, and you can suggest others who, are looking for some perspective to take a look at it on our Mohawk College website. Now, of course, this event was made possible by our WIT team. And I would now like to invite Carla Hall and Alice Rende to give our closing remarks. Now, Carla is a mathematics and mechanical engineering professor with Mohawk College and works with WIT on many initiatives. And Alice is a student in the mechanical engineering technology program and a student president of WIT. So I welcome them both for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you very much to our panelists, Adrianna, Tracy, and Joëlle. That was phenomenal. I am at the point in my career where I am still both advocating for myself, but in a position to help start advocating for others and start shaping the workplace in a way that they don't need to advocate. So Tracy, I loved all of the intel of what you do with KF Aero in order to that not have to be a thing. I really hope one day I'll be able to actually take those to heart and pay them forwards as I move ahead in my career. Thank you to Alison and Shaundra, if they're still here, for getting us going on the right foot. It's always nice to hear from them. Linda, as always, thank you for emceeing. You are fantastic at steering the conversation. It's always a great time listening to your interaction with the panelists and your little tidbits as you go on. Again, RBC, thank you for sponsoring not only this event, but so many WIT events and activities that we have going on. And lastly, thank you to all of you who showed up to hear this conversation tonight. I think it was great to have this perspective put out there, and I hope you at least got a little something out of it. So I'm going to pass this off to Alice now for her final remarks.
So unfortunately, I had to come in late because I had class until 5. That's one of my craziest days. I'm looking forward to watching this after. Advocacy is so important, and just to say thank you to everybody here through the college, the students, WIT. It's a very important topic. Unfortunately, it's a very exhausting thing to do. If you guys, anyone who's dealt with high levels of advocacy, to continuously keep up that fight is very emotionally exhausting. So I look forward to when it gets better, because I hope we can move forward and become a better society in general, making things easier, because that's how we should work towards. It may take some time, but the fact that we're going to make it better for each generation. I know Carla talks about her kids, making it better for them one day, just that idea of every generation, it becomes better. We want to move that forward. We want to become better. It's just things like this, talking about this is one of those ways. So thank you for taking time out of your day to talk about this.
Carla and Alice, thank you so much. And once again, Tracy, Adrianna, and Joëlle, thank you for being here. And for all the participants, thank you as well. Have a great rest of your evening. This has been an amazing discussion. I really enjoyed it. I always enjoy doing these. I learn it's just so wonderful to see people come together. So thank you and enjoy. And hopefully you've got some time to have some downtime and digest the conversation that we have just had, and work towards supporting others as much as you can. That's what community is all about. Good night, everybody.